I want to make you my special assistant." Those were the words that changed everything. I'm Daniel Foster, 41 years old, and for 7 steady years, I'd been senior operations analyst at Eastbridge Logistics, a place where consistency and quiet efficiency had always been my armor. I crunched numbers, streamlined operations, and stayed away from office drama. But that Tuesday morning, sitting across from Valerie Strickland, our new vice president of business strategy, I knew this wasn't a regular performance meeting. Valerie, just 38 and already one of the fastest rising stars in the company's history, leaned back in her chair, fingers tapping her desk like a rhythm only she could hear. There'd be extra duties, of course. Discretion. Loyalty, she said, her voice dripping with something far from professional. It wasn't subtle. This was no hidden message. This was a proposition, wrapped in executive lingo, from someone who believed her title gave her access to more than just budgets and boardrooms. And when I politely but firmly declined, her smile didn't just vanish, it turned cold. I'd survived in corporate America by being invisible, but now I'd become a threat, and deep down I knew this wasn't over, not even close. I returned to my desk with a knot tightening in my stomach. The look on Valerie Strickland's face when I declined her offer hadn't just been disappointment. It was disbelief, like I'd broken some unspoken rule. I wasn't sure exactly what would come next, but I knew it wouldn't be good. I tried to bury myself in freight manifests and scheduling software, pretending the meeting never happened. But that day marked a shift. Subtle at first, then unmistakable. Valerie's demeanor toward me changed. Gone was the overly friendly tone, the flirty glances, the too close seating arrangements during meetings. Replacing it was a kind of frost, a cold professionalism that carried an undercurrent of menace. She didn't speak to me directly unless necessary. When she did, it was curt and clipped. Then came the changes. Small things that added up fast. My quarterly review, which had always reflected above average performance, suddenly mentioned lack of initiative. I was removed from 2 key accounts I'd been managing for over a year, with no explanation. Projects that required my oversight were handed to less experienced colleagues. One Friday afternoon, I opened my inbox to find that I was no longer scheduled for the leadership development retreat I'd helped organize. Each move was surgical, calculated. I spoke with Derek Mann, a colleague I trusted. We'd worked together for nearly 4 years, shared countless late nights during audit season, and even grabbed lunch on most Thursdays. "Just keep your head down," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You know how these things go. People like her don't forget." That's when it hit me this wasn't professional fallout. This was retaliation. See, I wasn't not V. I'd spent over a decade in corporate environments. Enough to understand how whispers, performance reviews, and strategic reassignments could be weaponized. I'd watched promising colleagues get restructured out because they didn't play along. But I always thought I was safe because I didn't draw attention to myself. Turns out I did. Just not the kind I wanted. The signs had been there for months. Valerie's interest in me wasn't sudden. She'd been laying groundwork in ways I hadn't fully recognized at the time. Coffee check-ins that felt more like dates. Casual texts that arrived long after business hours. A seat next to her at every company dinner, where she'd spend the evening steering the conversation away from logistics and toward her personal life. When I declined her invitation to a leadership retreat in Asheville last month, citing a weekend with my daughter Emily, she gave me a smile that never reached her eyes. "Think about it, Daniel," she had said. "Opportunities like this don't come around often, especially for someone at your level." That "your level" stuck with me. It was both a reminder and a warning. Valerie didn't see me as a peer. She saw me as leverage, a tool to use, and when that didn't work, I became a problem to remove. So I started doing what I did best at documenting screenshots. Email chains, voicemails, calendar invites with vague but suggestive titles. Everything that seemed even slightly off, I archived in a secure, encrypted folder on my personal drive. I didn't know what I was building yet, but something told me I'd need it. It was the same instinct that helped me rise through the ranks, an ability to see patterns before they became problems. I just never imagined I'd need that skill to defend myself. Still, part of me hoped I was wrong, that Valerie would cool off. That maybe, just maybe, she'd move on. But people like her don't forget. They don't back down. They remove obstacles. I was no longer the quiet guy behind spreadsheets. I had become an inconvenience, one that needed to be handled. And deep down, I already knew how this story was going to end. I just didn't know yet how far she'd go to write the final chapter. It didn't take long for the hammer to drop. It was a Thursday afternoon when Andrea, our HR coordinator, showed up at my desk with a forced smile and a clipboard. "Hey Daniel, do you have a minute? Valerie wanted to touch base with you upstairs." I nodded, already knowing this wasn't a friendly chat. The conference room was empty, except for Valerie and a man I didn't recognize, probably legal. There was no coffee, no handshake, no opening pleasantries. Valerie sat with her arms crossed, her voice carefully neutral. "We've been reviewing your recent performance, Daniel," she began, eyes locked on mine. "And unfortunately, there are several areas of concern." I didn't flinch, such as, "There's been feedback from multiple team members about your unwillingness to collaborate, a lack of engagement, and, frankly, an attitude that doesn't align with Eastbridge's team culture." I almost laughed. I'd been leading cross-departmental workflow integrations for 2 years. The team had never missed a single quarterly goal. But now, because I didn't flirt back, I was not a cultural fit. Valerie slid a folder across the table. "We're letting you go. Effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance, provided you sign the release form today." The legal guy cleared his throat. "You can take a moment to review the terms." I didn't touch the folder. "This is retaliation," I said calmly. "And you know it." Valerie didn't blink. "No, Daniel. This is business." I stood up slowly. "You've made a mistake." She smiled, barely. "You're not what this company needs anymore." That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no calls. Just the quiet hum of my tires and the slow, crawling realization that I'd just been erased, not for failing but for saying no. Most people don't believe retaliation can be that swift, that clean. But it is. Companies don't need to scream at you or make a scene. They just remove you like a loose thread. A few signatures. A badge deactivated. Your name off the schedule. Just like that, you're gone. The next morning, I didn't wake up early. I didn't open my laptop. But I did open that folder from HR, the release form, the NDA, the non-disparagement agreement. That warned me against ever discussing this incident publicly. That was the final straw. I didn't sign anything. Instead, I spent the weekend organizing everything. My personal drive already held over 40 file screen captures of inappropriate messages, meeting invites titled things like private sync off-site vision chat, and texts sent well past midnight that no boss should ever send. But what I had now was motive and action. I'd been given a proposition. I'd said no. And within 90 minutes, I was jobless. That's not a coincidence. That's retaliation. I reached out to Pamela Knox, an employment lawyer recommended by a friend. She reviewed the materials in silence, then looked up at me and said, "This is one of the cleanest retaliation cases I've seen in years." She outlined the plan. File a formal complaint with Eastbridge's compliance department. Send notice of pending legal action. Prepare for EEOC involvement if the company didn't respond. I was nervous. I'm not a fighter. I don't like drama. But this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about principle. People like Valerie count on silence. They weaponize fear. They assume no one will stand up because the machine is too big. But they'd underestimated the quiet guy. The following Monday, I walked back into the Eastbridge building, not as an employee, but as a man with a mission. No badge, no polite nods from reception. Just a scheduled meeting with Compliance Officer Rachel Delaney, who had emailed me Friday evening asking for clarification regarding my complaint. I brought a laptop, a printed binder, and a thumb drive. "Let's get started," I said as Rachel closed the door behind me. The room was quiet. No Valerie this time, no legal muscle posturing across the table. Just Rachel, me, and a growing sense that this conversation would go one of two ways: resolution or escalation. I began with the email trail. 37 emails sent over 6 months. Not one of them overt, but all carrying the same tone. "Wish you had joined me for dinner in Asheville. Let's do a one-on-one sync over wine. Don't make me chase you, Daniel." Then the calendar invites. 4 meetings labeled strategic vision alignment, scheduled outside work hours, in locations nowhere near the office. 2 were canceled when I didn't respond. The others became performance reviews, conveniently held without witnesses. I showed her the text next. Late night messages sent well past 10 p.m., one even on a Sunday night. "Thinking about you. Hope you're not too stressed. I can help with that. Just say the word." Rachel's brows furrowed. "You kept all of this?" she asked. I nodded. From the moment I realized this wasn't just awkward, it was dangerous. Then came the recordings. 3 short audio files recorded during hallway conversations or quick desk visits. Legal in our state, each began with casual talk but quickly turned suggestive. In one, Valerie whispered, "You really need to stop playing hard to get." And then the final piece. A voice memo I recorded right after our last meeting the day I was fired. My voice, shaken but calm, summarizing what had happened. Names, times, tone, context. A real-time log of retaliation. One I hadn't edited or rehearsed. The rawness of it seemed to hit Rachel harder than anything else. She leaned back and sighed. "Daniel, this is substantial." "It's not just about me," I said. "I think there are others. I've heard rumors." I didn't want to believe them. But after what she did to me, "I think you need to look deeper." Rachel nodded. "We will. But this is going to get complicated." I stared straight at her. "It's already complicated." She collected the drive and binder. Promised they'd begin a formal investigation. Told me it would take time, and that I'd be kept informed. But the moment I walked out of that room, I knew I couldn't rely on internal processes alone. I just handed over everything I had. But if Eastbridge's goal was to bury the truth, I had to make sure the story stayed alive outside those walls. So I made 2 more calls that day. First, to Pamela Knox, my lawyer. She began drafting an official complaint for the EEOC and prepped me for potential mediation or litigation. She also reached out to a professional investigator to look into whether similar patterns existed in Valerie's previous roles. Then, I called Rebecca Sutton, a freelance journalist known for covering corporate misconduct cases. I didn't give her all the details yet, just enough to pique her interest. "I think I've got a story for you," I told her. "It's about a woman in power misusing it, and a company that's been turning its head the other way for years." She replied in one breath, "Tell me where and when." Within days, the pieces started falling into place. Pamela's investigator, Marcus Dwyer, was methodical. He began with Valerie Strickland's LinkedIn profile, her previous positions at 2 other mid-size firms in Chicago and Dallas, both of which she left abruptly despite apparent stellar performance. That raised his first red flag. Then came the digging. He found archived employee review sites, Glassdoor indeed. Buried beneath the glowing PR, approved ratings were a handful of cryptic complaints. "Watch your back if you're not her favorite." Tread carefully around upper management. Not all promotions are earned. Talented men mysteriously disappear after turning down offers. But the real breakthrough came from a former HR executive named Elijah Chen, who'd worked with Valerie 5 years prior. Marcus got him on a call. "I can't say too much," Elijah warned, "but I'll tell you this. 2 male employees filed HR complaints about her behavior. One was fired within a week. The other took a severance package and vanished. I left the company not long after." That was enough for Pamela. She subpoenaed HR records from Valerie's previous employer under the EEOC's investigation umbrella. While they stalled, we began a different strategy. We started reaching out. Through discreet LinkedIn messages, encrypted email threads, and phone calls made from untraceable burner numbers, we contacted 8 former employees who'd worked under Valerie across 3 companies. 6 responded. 4 were willing to talk. And 2 of them, Noah Levine and Carlos Jennings, had eerily similar stories. Noah had been a supply chain analyst at her old firm. "She invited me to a team-building dinner at her condo," he said. When I politely declined, I was demoted the next quarter and labeled non-collaborative. My manager told me it came from above. I left within 6 months. Carlos had it worse. He'd briefly led a logistics project team until Valerie took a personal interest in his progress. When I told her I was engaged and wanted to keep things professional, my calendar got wiped clean. I was pulled from key initiatives. HR said I was no longer aligned with the firm's direction. They both had partial documentation, screenshots, vague performance memos, even a few saved voicemails. Not enough on their own. But together, it painted a pattern. Valerie wasn't an isolated storm. She was a weather system, rolling through departments, targeting certain people, and leaving silent wreckage behind. Pamela compiled everything into a formal dossier. We labeled it Project Redlight. Inside, the timelines from all 4 men, internal documents showing sudden demotions, matching phrases used in termination justifications, evidence of NDA pressure. In at least 2 cases the legal case was strong. But we also had another weapon: public attention. Rebecca Sutton, the journalist I'd reached out to, flew down from Boston to meet me in person. She spent 4 hours reviewing the materials, double-checking sources, and confirming consent from the other victims. Then she looked up from her notebook and said, "This is going to shake the walls." She pitched the series to the Charlotte Observer, a 3-part feature under the title, "When Power Turns Personal: The Hidden Pattern Behind Eastbridge's Star Executive." The series would run under conditions anonymity for current employees, editorial protection for named whistleblowers, and verified cross-checking on every claim. I wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. This was bigger. I wanted protection, I wanted clarity. But most of all, I wanted to make sure I wasn't the last person Valerie could do this to. Because silence wasn't safety. Silence had let her rise. The article dropped on a Tuesday morning. By noon, Eastbridge's phones were lighting up. Investors were demanding answers. Internal forums were flooded with quiet thank yous from employees who had stayed silent for too long. By Wednesday, Valerie Strickland was placed on indefinite leave pending an internal investigation. By Friday, her name vanished from the company website. I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne moment. But the apology email from HR, cold, brief but real, felt like a strange kind of closure. Within a month, I received offers from 3 firms. Not just for analyst roles, but leadership positions. One even included a clause ensuring protected channels for whistleblowers. I chose a company that believed in transparency. The irony: I now lead their internal ethics and compliance program, from target to torchbearer. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything, at first. But if you stand your ground with truth and integrity, life has a way of restoring what you lost, often in better form. If you've ever been silenced out of fear, remember you're not alone. Share your feelings below. Have you ever experienced injustice at work? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more inspiring, true stories and profound lessons like this one. Like if you believe the truth should always be heard,